Hello guys, welcome to Redditor's Revenge. Here we post amazing revenge stories daily. And if you want more content like this, please do subscribe to the channel and stay tuned with us. Moving to our today's first story, about a pompous employer who mistreated his employees like they were his slaves. As a result, OP and her coworker managed to trap him in their evil plan, and have him humiliated at the meeting and kicked out of the workplace. Now story. Ugh, I was seriously going to do something about him this time. Enough was enough. He had had it coming for quite a while now. There had been warning signs, but I had been too dumb to ignore them. Not anymore. I was tired of sucking it up all the time. It was time for one of us to leave. Permanently. My name is Layla. I'm 30 years old and as of 3 years ago, employed at X Enterprises. This job was a good job with benefits and a great working environment. People in this industry usually never find jobs they like, but I'm an exception. I floated around the industry after getting my degree and worked at another place for a few years after my first internship. I was lucky to get a great job offer from my current company and I've never looked back. Everything was great here for the past 3 years. My boss was great, my colleagues were helpful and supportive, and overall there was a great work environment here. The pay was great too. I would have never considered moving if it wasn't for the change in personnel. My last boss, with whom I had had an excellent relationship, had to quit work and move to another state for personal reasons. Her name was Ashley and she was around 40 years old. Ashley had gotten pregnant and was expecting her second child. I was excited for her. Later on, she told me that she had decided to stay here, but her husband, unfortunately, was going to have to move. Consequently, when Ashley came back, though she was no longer going to be a manager, nor was she going to come back full-time. She was returning as a part-time intern due to her increasing responsibilities at home. That part wasn't a problem. People moved on and that was fine. What I did have a problem with was the new boss that came in. His name was Zeke, and simply put, he was a jerk. He had transferred from one of the other branches from another state, and according to the other employees had come highly recommended. I can't imagine why, because within a few short weeks, it became clear that he was extremely incompetent at his job, along with being a rude bully to the staff. We, meaning me and the other employees, had been extremely welcoming and had tried to make him feel right at home. On his second day there, he suddenly told me to pick up his laundry. It was an odd request, and one usually reserved for a personal assistant or office aide. I didn't match him in rank, but I was still highly placed in the company. Feeling bad for the poor guy, who I thought might have not gotten the hang of things yet, since he had just moved here, I decided to help him out. I went 2 hours out of my way to pick up his laundry and deliver it to his apartment. I thought that was that, but as soon as I got back, he requested me to get him some coffee. In a condescending tone, he informed me that he expected to get cafe-bought coffee every day at around the same time. I couldn't believe my ears. Still, I decided to suck it up and got him some coffee, thinking that he would settle down in a few days. On my way out, I spotted another employee, who worked down the hall from me, coming in. He told me that Zeke had told him to get him a sandwich from a cafe across the street and had expected him to pay out of his pocket. Completely shocked, I told him about what I had been doing all morning. He was equally surprised and said that we needed to inform Zeke that that wasn't the way things worked around here. After getting back, he was ready to send me on another errand. Before he could finish his sentence, however, I politely informed him that none of the employees were errand runners and that he should look into getting an assistant for all these requests. He looked at me like I was crazy. "This is my office," he said, "and all of your work under me. I can make you guys do anything I want." He then screamed at me to get out. I told the other employees what had happened. They were all very worried and didn't know what to do. I decided to talk to the senior manager on the floor above ours and see if he could figure out a solution. During my lunch break, I went to his office. He asked me what was wrong. I didn't want to come off as a snitch, so I told him that things were a little tense with Zeke's arrival, and that the office should hire a personal assistant for him to make the transition as smooth as possible. He said that he understood what I had said and promised to look into it. The next day, the employees, including myself, were relieved to find that a temporary assistant had been called in before the assignment of a permanent one. I was in charge of the interviews for the position of the permanent candidate and did my best to single out assistants with a strong backbone, those who could deal with Zeke. To my dismay, the first assistant quit the same day they were hired, citing a tough work environment and exaggerated expectations. And so it began. Over the 2 months, there was a revolving group of new assistants in our office, with the longest lasting a week. Almost all of them quit in tears after being yelled at and being asked to perform tasks out of their job requirement. Similarly, the staff was all fed up and a few of them had even resigned. I thought about doing the same, but then I learned of a similar level position to mine that had just fallen vacant. The employee had been fired for some reason and the management was looking for someone to take over that post. It was in another department altogether, so I would be free from Zeke and his terrible work ethic. There was only one problem. For a department transfer to be approved, I would first need approval from my manager, which was Zeke. Additionally, I needed a letter of recommendation from him. I was sure I wouldn't get approved, but I had to ask. There was no other way. So the next day, I broached the subject with him. Again, he looked at me like I was crazy. He asked why I would ever want to leave this department when things were going so well. I diplomatically told him that I was looking to improve my skills by trying out different things. And in fact, the post was empty, so why would there be a problem? He considered this for a while and then said he would have an answer by the end of the day. Later that day, his latest assistant quit. Just after she left, Zeke called me into his office and said he had a problem. None of the assistants that we had gotten him had turned out to be any good, and he needed somebody to take care of all the office matters. He said that he would approve my transfer application, but on only one condition. I would need to remain in my current position for another month and act in my current role as well as a part-time assistant to him. Only then would he give me his approval. I was practically foaming at the mouth, but knew that talking back and being disrespectful would cost me my job. I asked him to let me think about it for a while. After leaving his office, I immediately went to the senior manager's office and told him what had happened. He didn't look very surprised and said that he was going to let me in on a secret. Turns out, the only reason Zeke was still employed at the company was that he was a distant relative of our CEO. Everybody knew he was more trouble than he was worth and that he was very incompetent at his job. But due to his connections, they tolerated him and transferred him to different branches every year or two. The senior manager told me that unfortunately there wasn't much that he could do about it, and it was up to me to decide what to do. I could either resign from my job entirely or wait a month and see if the transfer gets approved. Excellent as the payment had been, and the state of my savings account, I couldn't afford to resign from a job without a reference and stay unemployed for a few months. I decided to tough it out and told Zeke that I agreed to his deal. He assured me that he would talk to management and keep that position occupied by a temporary employee until I could take over. The next month, plainly put, was torture. I was a personal slave to Zeke, there to fulfill his every whim. It got so bad that I fell behind on my workload and had to spend several overnighters to meet the deadline. On top of that, Zeke insisted I do most of his work as well, under the guise of mentoring me and showing me how to improve my skills. But what was the absolute worst was that a week before my month was over, I was talking to someone from the department I was going to go to, and they happened to mention that they had recently hired a permanent employee for the position I had wanted. After doing a bit of digging, I figured out what happened. Zeke had conveniently forgotten to submit the recommendation letter and transfer approval letter, which had blocked my transfer completely and forced the department to hire someone else. In short, he had completely screwed me over. When I confronted him about it, he feigned surprise and said that there must have been a mistake in the other department's administration, and that he had submitted everything on time. When I doubled down on my accusations, he grew belligerent, saying that I needed to learn my place, and besides, I couldn't prove he had done anything. He told me to be grateful and just do my job. That was the day I decided to leave the company for good. However, I couldn't leave before lining up another job and, more importantly, getting my revenge. I decided to team up with the other employees who were as fed as I was. There was one employee, Angelo, who Zeke bullied a lot. He was an immigrant and couldn't afford to lose his job, so stayed out of fear instead of resigning. We had tried to gather evidence of his bullying and harassment multiple times, but Zeke never went beyond cruel insults and shouting. All we needed was for him to get physical and lay his hand on an employee. That would be sure to get him fired, or at least transferred to another branch like he had been done before. I told Angelo that all he needed to do was mess up badly and provoke Zeke bad enough that he got physical. We would capture a video of the incident and use it to get him fired when the time came. Angelo agreed. To make Zeke mad and make him lash out, one of the other employees, Sarah, deliberately messed up an important presentation that Zeke was going to show one of the higher-ups. He got yelled at and was in a foul mood from then on. When he roared at Angelo to go get his usual sandwich, Angelo complied, secretly putting a large dose of laxatives in the lunch. Zeke spent the next hour sequestered in the bathroom, and when he finally came out, yelling for his coffee, Angelo served him scalding hot coffee. Only, before handing over the cup, Angelo tripped over the rug underneath the desk and poured the hot beverage all over Zeke's lap. Infuriated, he jumped up yelling at Angelo, who calmly stated it was Zeke's fault for putting a carpet in such an inconvenient spot. That did it. Zeke slapped him hard across the face, twice before shoving him into a wall. Another employee, Mark, who had been stationed just out of sight, holding up his smartphone, we have CCTV cameras as well, recorded the entire incident. He gave me a thumbs up, indicating that he had gotten sufficient evidence. I hurried over to the room before things could escalate, apologizing profusely, and dragged Angelo out of the room. Now that the first part of our plan was over, we just had to find the best time to get him fired. The presentation that he had messed up had been rescheduled with a warning to get it right the next time. The next date of the presentation was a week away. Zeke had warned us not to mess anything up this time and to get it done right. He said that if things went well, he might be promoted soon. He told me that I was going to be in the meeting room with him to make sure things went smoothly. This fits perfectly into our plans. I was the only one out of the team who had another job lined up by now. I could take all the blame if things went wrong. Next, we went to the senior manager and told him about our plan. Amused, he agreed to help us, and so it began. The day before the presentation, nobody but me showed up at the office. When Zeke arrived and asked where everyone was, I acted surprised and said I didn't know. The senior manager soon came by and said that due to harsh working conditions, the entire team had mass quit, saying they couldn't take it anymore. Shocked, Zeke stood there with his mouth open. Horrified, he said that nobody had yet submitted the work they needed to get done and the presentation was one day away. He flew around the office all morning, calling the team and begging them to come in and hand over the materials. Of course, everyone ignored his calls. He then called and asked me to do everything by myself. I politely told him that I had to pick up his laundry and that I wouldn't be back at the office for another hour. After screaming at me, he hung up. I went to his apartment and splashed blue dew on all his shirts so that he wouldn't have anything to wear the next day. After that, I went home. The next day, I got to work early and welcomed the senior executives. The time went by and Zeke didn't show up. Finally, half an hour late, he showed up in his rumpled yesterday clothes. Apologizing to everyone, he told me to start the presentation. With a triumphant smile, I started the presentation. The first and only slide had a video, the one we had taken the week before. The executives were shocked to see the video and demanded an explanation from Zeke. He spluttered and stammered, not knowing what to say. He blamed it all on me, saying that I was a vengeful employee who had tricked him. It was too late. The damage was done. One of the executives said that it was enough. They had tolerated Zeke for long enough, and this time, he was done. They stormed out. I told Zeke that I was done and left, feeling like a champ. The same day, Zeke was kicked out of the office for his misbehavior and bad conduct. The next day, the employees returned to work, the senior manager having faked their resignation. I moved on to my new job, happy to have taken my revenge before I had left. My colleagues later told me that Zeke was never seen again in the office and was fired for good. Now, here is the end of our today's first story. I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know your opinion about this story in the comments section. I would love to read them. So before moving to the next story, please hit the like button and do subscribe to the channel to stay tuned with us for more awesome stories. Now moving to our final story, about a petty revenge OP took on one of the girls in the dorm because she rumored OP hitting on her boyfriend. So OP got his BF kicked out of the dorm. Now story. I live in a college dorm on an all-female floor. I usually wear a bra if leaving the dorm building, but I'm not going to put on a bra under my shirt just to walk down the hall to the bathroom. A few days ago, I left my room and walked 10 yards down the hall to the water fountain, refilled my water bottle, and went back to my room. I was wearing a white tank top and no bra. The tank top was fitted but not see-through, so you could only see the outline of my nips. There was a small group of people hanging out in the hall outside a few of the rooms, but I didn't think much of it, until around half an hour later, when I got a knock on the door from one of the girls I'd seen in the hall. She said something to the effect of, "Hey, so sorry to ask you this, but if you go out into the hall again, could you put a bra on? My boyfriend's out there and he was staring a little, so." I'm super non-confrontational, so I was like, "Yeah, sure, sorry about that." And for the rest of that night, anytime I left my room I put a bra or sweater on, and that was the end of it, or so I thought. The next day, my roommate told me she'd overheard the girl telling a few of her friends about the incident while in the bathroom. She said the girl was making it sound like I'd been purposely trying to seduce her boyfriend, wearing nothing, taking my time at the water fountain, posing to push out my tits, the whole works. When she left the bathroom, my roommate said the girl was acting it out at the water fountain, pretending to be me. That night, I passed the girl and some of her friends on my way to go brush my teeth. I wasn't wearing a bra. I was already in pajamas. The girl looked pointedly down at my chest and all of them started giggling. But the last straw was when the entire dorm got an email from the RA yesterday, saying she'd gotten some anonymous complaints about people dressing inappropriately in the hallways and asking that we all just make sure we're keeping things covered up. So here's where I got my petty little revenge. I knew that the girl's boyfriend doesn't go to college here. The girl and I were in the same orientation group and chatted a bit back then. I also knew that due to the pandemic, we aren't allowed to have non-student, family guests in the dorms this year. So I used the same anonymous complaint form to issue a complaint about people bringing their off-campus boyfriends into our dorm, and them not wearing a mask is mandatory in the hallways, although not frequently enforced. This morning, the RA emailed again saying that due to anonymous complaints, they'd be enforcing the no off-campus guests rule by checking the IDs of unfamiliar guests to make sure they were students from then on. This girl should be thanking me. If she was concerned about her boyfriend seeing the vague outline of my nips in the dorm hallways, she no longer needs to worry. Now, here is the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know your opinion about this story in the comments section. If you had a similar stories, you can share it and I would love to read them. So before leaving, please hit the like button and do subscribe to the channel to stay tuned with us for more awesome stories.